Another Wednesday is come and gone, and I got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen meta interpretations invade the pages of our comics, unexpected team ups between intergalactic powerhouses, and the seedy underlying darkness of Middle America. But let's kick things off this week with Fall of the House of X number 4, written by Jerry Duggan with artwork by Lucas Wernick. So let's start off with that first part right there, the artwork. I would be extremely generous in saying that Warnick drew more than 2 pages of this book, and with his name being the premier artist listed on this, was extraordinarily discouraging and misleading. The artwork wasn't bad necessarily, but I would definitely anticipate he did more pages in this than what were actually presented to us. So the rundown right now is that we know that this is going to be, they're trying to wrap up the Krakoan era. An apocalypse returns from Morocco and he starts making a bunch of sacrifices in an effort to actually revitalize the island nation of Krakoa. Not the Krakoa, the idea, but Krakoa, the actual mutant entity. So they need to keep him up around and alive and kicking. On the flip side of that, Xavier is also sacrificing humanity to maybe make a bid to save mutant kind altogether, knowing that the robot dominance is, on the cusp of actually happening here. Neither win, no one's happy. Um, Raise your hand if you're tired of the Xavier isn't good stories, because I feel like that's all we seem to be getting here, decade over decade over decade. He just keeps making moves that make you question him more and more, and at this point, he's more of a bad guy than Magneto possibly ever was. It's kind of become an old, boring trope. I'm kind of done with it. I'm feeling the same way with this book, to be completely honest. I don't want to hammer that home too much here, but I want to see the Krakoan era through. I'm definitely going to finish this series out. But if you're not invested in this, it is a seriously hard book to recommend. All right, next up on the poll, we have Roxon Presents Thor number 1, written by Al Ewing with artwork by Greg Land. So this was a fun book. It was a totally weird book, and I'll be honest, it wasn't originally on my pull list, but as a reader of Immortal Thor, I thought I would give it a shot. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised. By no means is this something that is like integral to your understanding of Immortal Thor, but it's a really fun way for Al Ewing to kind of stretch muscles that maybe he's not used to. It's a really humorous, fun take on the idea of intellectual property, and he really just kind of gets a chance to poke fun at things like tech bros, the overwhelming nature of advertising in comic books, especially in the pages, things like microtransactions. So it's just a really fun, like wink and wink wink nudge nudge kind of issue. With that being said, with the nature of it being that way and definitely poking at corporate comics and corporate America, having Greg Land's artwork on this made so much sense. And it's probably the first time in decades that I can say that Greg Land's artwork made sense in a comic. We know where he pulls his inspiration from, and we definitely know the stories of how he comes up with the pictures that he draws within these pages. So with the fact that it is playing with so many ideas of intellectual property and corporations, it just kind of made sense. And for the first time, I just felt like, hey, I'm happy to see Greg Land's artwork in a book. So with that being said, again, not integral, but a really fun story and a really fun addition to what you might be seeing in Immortal Thor. So, Roxanne Thor number 1, did you pick it up? Let me know your thoughts. All right, let's talk Miles Morales Spider-Man number 19, written by Cody Ziegler with artwork by Federico Vincentini. So, this is the culmination of everything we've been building towards since the inception of this volume of Miles Morales Spider Man. Everything is finally coming to a head. Miles is taking on Rabble with the fate of his family and the fate of the Hero Stalker team, which includes Scorpion, at stake. This was a really, really fun issue without the weight of tie-ins and lead-ins to events and all the things that can weigh down this book. Cody Ziegler is able to craft a really compelling story. And when Vincentini is on the book, it really, they're able to work together in a manner that keeps things so kinetic. It is an action-packed, fun book when we don't have to worry about those tie-ins. Now, this is one of those issues. I wish we could take these 19 issues that we have, and if we condensed it down to 12 issues and cut out the stuff with those tie-ins, man, this would be an easily recommended Spider-Man book, and it would definitely be amongst the top tier of the Spider-Man family of books that we have. The other thing that really stood out to me is the colors in this book by Brian Valenza. It They did something with them that was just really an original take on something that was influential within the comics. So something happens within the comic where Miles is not able to see properly, and in that time they take advantage of the coloring. And while we're used to the vibrant, vivid colors that we would see from a Spider-Man comic, it cuts it right down to black and white with halftones, and you can definitely feel the manga influence in those pages when they're taking place. The art style doesn't change necessarily, but it's always been manga influenced. And when we see that paired with the black and white nature, it's just such a fun way to actually weave that into the story and have it make sense, but also be able to kind of show the influence within the pages. It was a really creative way to do that. During that little part of the story, it was an awesome page turn. I really loved seeing it, and overall, this was a really, really satisfying issue. I can't wait to see where they go with this next. They really need to make Miles Morales Spider Man one of the premier books and treat it as such. But with that being said, Miles Morales Spider Man number 19, did you pick it up? Let me know your thoughts. Let's jump over to DC for a second here. We're going to talk Superman number 13, written by Joshua Williamson, with artwork by Rafa Sandoval. So this is a continuation, and it's part two of the House of Brainiac story that originally began in Action Comics last week. And if you watched my previous episode, you'll know that I had definitely never had any interactions with Superman, or I shouldn't say never, but it's never been a book that's hooked me outside of those evergreen stories that we've had. But I'm along for the ride for the House of Brainiac from here on out. This has been awesome. So Superman teams up with Lobo now. In the previous issue of Action Comics, we see that the Zarnians were working with the Brainiac and trying to capture all the superpowered individuals. Lobo wasn't present, but now Superman knew that he needed some insight on how to deal with these people, and who's the best person for that? The main man. So Williamson is able to craft dialogue for Clark or Superman in such a just a wholesome way, and some writers can really tap into that, and they really get those Midwestern sensibilities of a guy from Smallville. He totally gets it. The conversation that he's having with Lobo, when he's taking a moment to reflect on some of the lessons that Pa Kent told him in his past about, it's usually when you yell at a person, they don't remember the remark that you're making, but they remember that they yelled at you. Things like that just ring so true to this guy that was brought up on the farm. And it was just it was just such a well-crafted way to bring forth those things, those qualities in Clark. Joshua Williamson definitely has a good grasp on that. Now, the differences in coloring on this book were really played up in a fantastic way. When it's Lobo and Superman, we see those bright primary colors. We see the reds and the blues. But we're shifting stories, right? We're playing with not only Superman, but we're also working within Brainiac's realm and all the different Brainiac models that he has and the superheroes that he had captured in the previous issue. And when you jump back and forth from that, you get the vibrant reds and blues, and then you move over to those page turns when Brainiac is present, and you get the sickly greens and the neon pinks. And it's just a fantastic way to keep your eye captivated on these pages and kind of, keep yourself looking forward to the page turn where you can see these overarching stories take place, and you can see the differences just in not only in the dialogue and the approach of the characters, but the colors themselves. Superman's been a fantastic issue. I've loved it so far. Let me know what you're thinking. All right, the next book from the big two so far is going to be Ultimate Black Panther number 3, written by Brian Edward Hill with artwork by Stefano Caselli. So this was kind of a setting the foundation kind of issue. So Killmonger and T'Challa, they've met one another, and they're sitting down and they're breaking bread, trying to figure out kind of the best path forward for Wakanda and how to make sure that they're defending it in the best way possible. On the flip side, we see Shuri and Okoye basically having a little bit of that same conversation on whether or not they trust how T'Challa is going to be the ruler of Wakanda and the approach that he takes. And really, it comes down to blows with Okoye and Shuri over what the right approach is going to be. It's a really kind of fun, interesting dynamic, with one being the queen of Wakanda and one being the next of kin to the throne of Wakanda. So it's kind of a fun way of dealing with all of that. There's, you have the intrigue of their friendship and the familial relationship that they have, but you also have the weight of the nation on all of their shoulders. So he'll keep spoon feeding us more of this Wakandan mythos in each issue, and each character really gets their time to shine. I've really appreciated his approach on this. Nothing has ever felt like he's never tipped the differential. He's always kind of keeping things, weighed out, because he has a good cast of characters and everyone has gotten their time to really show something on the pages. This issue leaves us with a mysterious cliffhanger, though, and I don't know how to take this, if this is really just going to be a level of importance to Ultimate Black Panther, but to me it feels like the cliffhanger is really leading towards some ramifications that could really impact the entirety of this new Ultimate universe that the maker has created. So I'm really excited to see how they're going to play with that and what they do with it, and honestly, what it even is. So with that being said, Ultimate Black Panther, let me know what you were thinking. Okay, moving on to the indie books this week, let's talk about Lotus Land number 6, written by Darcy Van Polgeest with artwork by Kyle Felipe. So this is the culmination, this is the climax of the story that they've set forth. And Detective Strickman has kind of made his last ditch effort to hold these responsibilities of finding this missing person, and kind of bringing to light the cover up that he's found out through his investigation. So the tragic nature of the hero in this story has been made even more tragic as you've learned more and more about his past. And that's kind of one of the tropes of a good detective novel. So it's not to be unheard of that we're seeing it here. But the story ends on this like truly somber note where everything changes, but also nothing changes. It's reminiscent. I've seen this in a couple different movies as well, but it's one of those things. It's a hard luck hero. And it was really a surprising thing knowing that most of the times stories are crafted to tell the happy ending, and I can't say that this was the happy ending. There was a lot of revelations, a lot of truths seen, and it kind of spelled out the notion that the good guys don't always win. The only downside to this issue that I've seen is that I feel like Darcy needed maybe a couple more issues to really flesh this out. This issue in particular felt like we were really rushed toward the finish line, and I think it would have definitely benefited with a little bit more time to breathe. With that being said, it did craft a satisfying story. I think he's done a really fantastic job, and I think his career specifically in comics is really blossoming. He's got a lot of good things coming down the pipeline as well. Um, the story here, it was more than a story just about the mystery, right? It was a story about not only our hero, but just in general, a story about acceptance and reflection. And I think looking back at that, there are beautiful notions that we can take from that. It might be a more satisfying read, and it might be something where these themes can be further explored better in reading it in the trade and kind of going from start to finish through the story. But with that being said, I think what I've pulled from it is that this was a wholly satisfying and good book to really give to show people that Darcy Van Polgeest can really pull together a tight narrative. With that being said, Lotus Land number 6, did you pick it up? And let me know what your thoughts are. Next up from the indies, let's talk Beyond Real number 3, written by Zach Kaplan with artwork by Vincenzo Riccardi. This was a really fun book, actually. This was a surprising issue. The nature of the story that we've gotten so far is that there is a woman whose boyfriend is put into a coma, and somehow, some way, she kind of works her way into the source code of life itself. And when we talk about the source code of life, it's kind of the matrix train of thought. So all the artwork that we've seen previously has been very rigid, very cold colors, very straight lines. And when you flip open the first page of this, it is just like filled to the brim with bright psychedelic imagery and colors that just pop. And it is so different than the previous issues, that I had to look back and make sure that it was the same artist previously that was working on this, because the approach, while the artistic quality is the same, the approach is so much different. But it's a really cool way to interpret how our main character June is really breaking through and getting deeper and deeper into the levels as she searches for the thing that they refer to as the source. Now, the issue's scope felt a bit stretched out, being that it was really just a story about them trying to work through their next steps on finding the source. They've broken through, and this was really just about getting to the next breaking point. So it was kind of light on action beats and story details. It was more about the character development, and we learn a little bit more about June's compatriots as they're trying to figure out, hey, what is the thing that you're looking for? What could you have the source code change in your life to make it better? And we learn a little bit about their pasts before they had actually, found themselves within the source code of life. So it was a really fascinating issue. It told us a little bit more about what the characters needed. Maybe it spent a little bit too much time there, but with the quality of the art and the page turns, it was really just a treat for the eyes. So with that being said, it did balance itself out. But Beyond Real number 3, if you picked it up, let me know what you were thinking. The next book up here, we have Displaced number 3 from Boom Studios, written by Ed Brisson with artwork by Luca Casalagueda. So the survivors of the Oshawa disappearances kind of are at a point now where they're disagreeing on how they navigate this new norm, basically, that they're dealing with the nature of the fact that within a matter of seconds, as soon as a person really looks away from them, they're gone from their memory. So it's hard. They're trying to figure out how are they supposed to survive and how are they supposed to live, knowing that as soon as the memory of them is gone, they will, for all intents and purposes, be gone as well. But how do they make a living? How do they just survive as human beings? The old man Harold kind of lets Emmett in on a secret that he may be different than the others as well. And that's really intriguing, considering that Harold is the one that shows up right at the beginning, the onset of this series, to warn the survivors that we have right now, to let them know Oshawa is disappearing. Oshawa is going to go away. You need to get out of there. There's a reason he knew that. We don't know the inner workings yet, but it's definitely leading us to believe that Emmett is going to be something more akin to him as opposed to just one of the survivors. So it's been really cool spending time with the ancillary characters, because Emmett has definitely been our number one hero of the story. He's been the protagonist, with the old man Harold kind of taking that secondary character arc. So it was nice to spend some time with the other characters and kind of see some of the narratives that they're going through, some of the character choices that they're making, and it's really making everyone come to heads over how they're going to further move along and how they're going to live their lives. And it's really interesting seeing that a lot of these different characters have wildly different notions on how that's going to happen. With that being said, it did slow the story down a little bit, but just a little bit. I think it was still fascinating enough to see what these other people were doing and their approaches that they were going to take. And knowing some of the more violent approaches that some of these other characters wanted to take, it really drives home the ending of the story, where we see some acts take place that we did not expect to see happen. So it's unweaving and it's unraveling this mystery, and we're getting more answers as new questions come up, which is absolutely the best way to approach this. Once you get too many questions with no answers, it becomes unsatisfying. But also, if you tell us too much, then what are we reading the next issue for? So I think Brisson's doing a really, really good job with this. They feel earned. It feels like a really good place to be with issue number 3. We're kind of at the midpoint, I believe, of where this series is going to go. So with that being said, Displaced, I really enjoyed it, but I'm more curious, what are you thinking? All right, we're getting into the nitty gritty of the best comics this week here. Let's talk about a second runner up here, because it was just that good. Let's talk about Helen of Windhorn number 2, written by Tom King with artwork by Bilquiz Evely. So the story so far is that in issue 1, we ended seeing that Helen's grandfather was, for all intents and purposes, either a monster hunter or a person who's protecting the manor in which they reside. Either way, he is definitely kind of walking the tightrope between a land of fantasy and a land of reality. So Helen is really struggling to come to grips on everything that she's seen. She doesn't understand what is happening, and her grandfather just flat out will not open up to her. So it leads her. It's leaving her in the dark, but it's also leaving her in a place where she wants to understand these mysteries more and more. And as the story unravels, we start to see that some of these creatures and some of these things that her grandfather is dealing with are really pulled right from the pages of Helen's father's books that he was writing. And again, that's the grandfather's son. So there's some kind of familial thing happening here. And maybe the stories that were thought to be of a fantasy world weren't quite so fantastical as much as they were reality. The narration and the time jumps in this book really make for an entertaining mystery, while Evely's panel work here really incorporates the interesting parallels between those two things. So the story is being told by way of recordings and an interview from Helen's teacher being told in the future. So we're kind of learning things. We know that the narration and the narrator knows more than they're letting on, but the way that it's kind of unweaving is being told in a really fantastic way. It's a Tom King book, so there's a lot of narration, and there's definitely he's getting paid by the letter, it seems, but nothing ever feels out of place, and every word and every line feels like it just makes so much sense. It's so nice. It's a well laid plan, and I think that Evely's artwork is doing such a good job making that narration work. There's some panels specifically where it's a jump from the past to the present with the interviewer, completely different people, but the panel work and the same figure drawings, it's just such a pleasure to look at. This book would actually really benefit, and I believe something is coming down the pipeline from a black and white issue. I would love to see the line work that she puts forth without the color work. The color work is absolutely fantastic, but it would be really nice to see just how much rendering is done before the colors are actually laid down. So, with that being said, Helen of Windhorn, it was very close to being a top comic of the week contender. It was very close to being the runner up. It was just right there. So, I'm loving this book so far. Helen of Windhorn, if you're picking it up, let me know if you loved it too. And with the true runner up this week, let's talk John Constantine Hellblazer, Dead in America #4, written by Cy Spurrier with artwork by Aaron Campbell. So this edged out Helen of Windhorn just by this much, but it was such a fascinating issue, and it was just so well written and so well drawn that it just eked it out just that much. And I think maybe what the notion of why it eked it out was that I finally got a grasp of what this book was trying to do, and this book finally got its hooks into me. Previously, I was really trying to understand where we were going with this because the storyline just kind of felt like it didn't know where it was going. Like there was interconnectivity here, but also each issue felt like its own entity that I wasn't drawing the parallels between them. Well, with this issue specifically, I finally feel like I figured out that this is more of an episodic nature book than I had anticipated. I thought there was going to be a clear overarching story, not so much. So, with this issue, John and his team investigate a missing person in a small town America, and it's kind of akin to the movie Stir of Echoes. There's some dark underlying things that the township itself is definitely trying to cover up, and John, being John, is going to definitely investigate that, and he's going to do so in a very Constantine esque manner. It's really fun. His dialogue is whip smart. Cy Spurrier I mean, he flat out knows the voice of this character at this point, and everything just feels so true to the character. I mean, John Constantine is the type of person you're not going to get a hug from him, and you're never going to see him grow. Right? That is the character of John Constantine, and it shows through and through. Now, with this story in particular, though, it's kind of fun with his team being one of the individuals that he helped in the other occult that we've seen in previous issues. Some of them being the bar owners that are now following him. And in particular, the best interaction he has is with Swamp Thing himself. Swamp Thing is such a really great addition to this issue specifically, and they have a lot of fun banter, and they talk about things that have happened in the past, and Swamp Thing is definitely at a place now where he is not fully trusting John Constantine, and he knows he knows just how things are going to play out if John Constantine has his way through every single thing. So he's definitely trying to steer him into the right direction. The combination of line work and colors is just a sight to behold in this. Aaron Campbell's artwork is just, it's so gritty and so textured, and the coloring of this book, it is when it needs to be, when it's within the township and they're within the bars and the fields, everything is just so dirty and grimy. But when moments are needed where magic takes place, like true magic, like something is conjured, it is just like, it is breathtaking to see on the page. Like there's big bold colors and it's juxtaposed so well with those gritty grimy line works and colors that we've seen, that where like when something like that truly happens, man, it's like an explosion. So the story wraps up here, and like I said, with the one and done nature, we do get a satisfying ending that kind of spells out what's happened in this town, specifically revolving around the football team and maybe some of the notions of pride and shame that the families of these football players have in what they did and what they needed to do when you're looking out for the livelihood of your own child, even if they've done something truly horrendous. So it was a really fascinating look at the notions of some of the things that children and parents have to go through. And I really think it was a satisfying Constantine Hellblazer story. I'm really excited to see where they continue to take this series. So, with that being said, John Constantine Hellblazer, Dead in America #4. Wow, that's a mouthful. But did you enjoy this issue as much as I did? All right, let's wrap things up with the top comic of the week. And this week, we're talking about Avengers Twilight #5, written by Chip Zdarsky with artwork by Daniel Acuna. So this is the penultimate issue. We're getting really close to this wrapping up. And the Red Skull kind of enacts his final plans for dominance. We've seen him take over the United States, not figuratively, not the puppet master, but very truly taking over the United States with the help of Tony Stark's son at his side. The newly reformed Avengers are there. They're definitely going to be taking the fight directly to Johann, and they're going to be trying to make their final stand. And it was a really nice notion that we've seen in this book here, because throughout the entirety of this, it's really been about Cap struggling with the nature of how he's approached things, how been a man of action, and how he shoulders the burden of all these things. And it's been about him as opposed to maybe the team itself, shouldering that burden together. And there was a big worry specifically from him, knowing that America and the Red Skull have an army behind him, but not only an army, but they have society and decades worth of quote unquote brainwashing that's been enacted that they're going to have to combat. It's been nice to kind of see that the notion that Cap has had, it really comes forward, right? We see his friends come along for the ride with him. We see that there's those that aren't going to accept what they've been spoon-fed decade over decade by the Red Skull. And we've seen that the heroes of the past are still here to put up the good fight alongside with him. Um, let's be completely honest here when it comes to the artwork. Give Acuna the Eisner for Best Artist already. Why wait? We don't have to, because the artwork has been absolutely spectacular. It has been leaps and bounds beyond any artwork that I've seen in any comic this year. And the fact that he is kind of taking the reins and doing all of this. Now, granted, he's had years to work on this, but it goes to show, if you have an evergreen product, which this will absolutely be an evergreen book that you could pick up and read year after year after year. When you give an artist and a writer time to really work on their craft and make something spectacular, man, does it pay dividends. No one is close to rendering the way that he is rendering in the pages of this book. Zdarsky, just as well as Acuna, man, the story that he's written on here, it's timely in a way that, like, man, it parallels so many things that we struggle with as a society of ourselves, right? We are separated in some ways that it feels like there's no coming together, and we're spoon fed all of these things through the media that we want to believe, but we can tell are definitely just propagating ways to make money and fearmonger, as opposed to truly giving us the truths of ourselves, right? And it's so many times we kind of just stop looking towards common sense and we kind of keep looking towards the worst of the worst. And it's really unfortunate, but it's such a well-timed, well-crafted story, and it's a book that I feel like is going to just age like wine. The story is going to make more and more sense, and it's going to be better and better and better as the years go on. So the limited nature of the story also keeps Zdarsky really just kind of laser focused. All right, there's no time for any fluff whatsoever. He gets to the story beats, he gets to the things that needs to happen. He keeps this book action packed, kinetic, and moving forward. And with the cliffhanger that we're led up to on the last page of this book, that is going to definitely come to a culmination in the finale of this. Wow. I didn't expect it. I should have expected it considering that we've heard the words H Day over and over and over, but I didn't. And I was so pleasantly surprised because if we're going to have an Avengers book, we should definitely see as many founding members of the Avengers as we can. So, Avengers Twilight number 5, absolutely my top comic of the week. It is probably going to be amongst my top comics of the year come that time, which is crazy because it's only April, but it's just that strong. So, Avengers Twilight number 5, let me know if you enjoyed it as much as I did. So, that's what I got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read and what were your thoughts? Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and be part of the panel by leaving a comment down below. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you later.